All right, guys, hello, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today we have more coverage of the crisis in Palestine, the crisis in Gaza. We're going to have a relatively brief episode for you today, just a couple of articles. First, we're going to be discussing a recent report out of UNRWA, that's the United Nations Relief Fund for Palestine, that's been in and out of the news media cycle recently regarding the cutting of funding for them. But this article, this study in particular, indicates that UNRWA workers in Palestine were detained and tortured by the IDF into giving quote-unquote confessions about UNRWA workers being tied to Hamas militants, right? So we're going to be covering that. It's a relatively brief article, but I thought it would be important to bring up to you guys. I haven't really heard or seen anyone talking about it yet, but just pretty egregious, pretty telling example of how IDF runs their show, right? And how, of course, we all know they've wanted to have UNRWA shut down because it is like the number one institution that brings aid and support of all kinds, from education to healthcare to food to Palestinians, right? So kind of that bigger ploy to get it shut down, right? And the lengths, the extremes they're willing to go to get that done. With that, we're also going to be doing some brief coverage on the West Bank in Palestine because, we haven't really talked about what's been going on there as much, obviously, as compared to the Gaza Strip, because just the level of horror show, but we are seeing escalations there. We are seeing mass violence there, deportations, a ramping up of, clearing out of Israeli homes and developments of settlements that have been greenlit recently, and of course just random raids and violence, generally speaking, against hospitals, refugee camps, things like that. So we'll be touching on that as well here, guys. So we'll go ahead and jump into our source material here. This first article I have is the one regarding the report from UNRWA, right? This is out of Reuters, right? So again, not some left-wing rag, not some, random opinion, op-ed sort of thing. This is a study that's come out of UNRWA and has been published by Reuters. Let's see here. It says, UNRWA report says Israel coerced some agency employees to falsely admit Hamas links. March 8th, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said some employees released into Gaza from Israeli detention reported having been pressured by Israeli authorities into falsely stating that the agency has Hamas links and that staff took part in October 7th attacks. The assertions are contained in a report by the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, reviewed by Reuters and dated February 2024, which detailed allegations of mistreatment in Israeli detention made by unidentified Palestinians, including several working for UNRWA. So it looks like this report was compiled or put together or in the process of being gathered throughout February, and now we're going into mid-March now. This came out a few days ago. I wonder why this wasn't brought to us sooner, why we haven't seen this. Like even, Reuters major outlet, Al Jazeera major outlet, there's been little to no discussion about it up until recently. I don't know if that's just because UNRWA only just now came forth with this study or what the deal is with that. But obviously there's also been a lot going on, especially with escalations in the West Bank as a result of Ramadan. We see a lot of this in occupied territories during this time, right? The document said several UNRWA Palestinian staffers had been detained by the Israeli army and added that the ill treatment and abuse they said they had experienced included severe physical beatings, waterboarding, and threats of harm to family members. These are all things we've seen already from the insane amount of coverage we've done just on this channel about some of the human rights abuses, and threats of harm to family is another huge one perpetuated by the IDF. Agency staff members had been subjected to threats and coercion by the Israeli authorities while in detention and pressured to make false statements against the agency, including that the agency has affiliations with Hamas and that UNRWA staff members took part in the 7th October 2023 atrocities, the report said. This is just crazy that this is coming out. It's not crazy, but this is just, Another one of these examples of, especially with the Israel-Palestine conflict, genocide, of, when you're on the left, you come out and you say these things, independent media, left-leaning analysts say this and that is what's actually happening, and this is lies, and people act like you're crazy or whatever, particularly liberals, right? And then, what do you know? It comes out a brief time later, especially with this conflict, because the propaganda is just so terrible, and there's so many different agencies and organizations working, and independent media working to discredit it. But then it comes out that, we were right, Israel lied about it. And then a lot of times, as in this case, we found out even more than just the lies. We find out that not only were we right and that they were lying or that this was a half truth, but then, as in this case, we find out there's another even more egregious truth added on top of that, right? Just crazy, but I'm not surprised. In addition to the alleged abuse endured by UNRWA staff members, Palestinian detainees more broadly described allegations of abuse, including beatings, humiliation, threats, dog attacks, sexual violence, and deaths of detainees denied medical treatment, the UNRWA report said. These are all things, again, that we have covered ourselves on just this channel, not to mention Electronic Intifada, not to mention Lee Camp, not to mention Empire. I mean, the list goes, Mint Press, Gray Zone. I mean, countless amounts of independent media exposing these sorts of human rights abuses. I mean, we've covered dozens and dozens of such instances just on this channel, right? So why would we expect it to be any different to UN officials? As we know, they've killed how many UN officials? Like 100 or more now? I've lost count, which is fucking sad. Same with journalists. Asked by Reuters for comment on the range of allegations in the report, an Israeli military spokesman didn't specifically respond to allegations of UNRWA staff being coerced, but said the Israeli Defense Forces act in accordance with Israeli and international law to protect the rights of detainees. It's like a fucking cuckoo clock, man. Yeah, the evidence suggests otherwise. The mountain, the leviathan of evidence, not just anecdotal, right? The spokesperson said free detainees are... This is a key point here, guys. The spokesperson said free detainees are subject to Hamas control and can be forced to denounce Israel or risk harm. So they're trying to say that this report coming out of UNRWA with these testimonies of Palestinians that were abducted and then tortured, and they say forced to make quote-unquote confessions against the IDF having coerced them into saying that people in UNRWA were related to the Hamas attacks on October 7th. He's trying to say that they're saying this because of risk of harm, like that Hamas is threatening them. If you don't say this, we'll kill you. What the fuck are you talking about? I mean, as if we have seen so much of this from Israel itself. I mean, this is what it always is with colonial powers, right? Whatever they say, it's just projection of what they are actually doing, be it the genocide of Uyghurs in China or human rights abuses and political repression in Russia. And it's not that some of these things don't happen, but whatever they say is just the West is doing it 100 times whatever is actually happening, and then they project it constantly, right? I mean, for the great example with this, Israel did exactly this during the brief ceasefire, or pause in hostilities, rather. It wasn't much of a ceasefire, where they were trading hostages. Israel literally threatened harm and threatened to re-imprison the hostages that they were letting go, the political prisoners, the hostages. Israel had hostages too, that they were letting go, saying if you even if you celebrate or look happy for being let out of the prison, we will come and arrest you again. And then we saw them do exactly that once that ceasefire was over and everything was said and done. One, they came in hard as hell. They killed like 200 people in a single day, to make a point. And then they also went around and rounded up a bunch more political prisoners. And they were actually doing it while the negotiations and for hostage release was going on, right? So again, just projection. Responding to that assertion about detainees' credibility, Tuma, that is the PR director, Tuma is the PR director for UNRWA, said the report was based on firsthand testimonies that people told us. In some cases, they were clearly some physical impact on people's bodies and also psychological impact. So this has also been documented. The Israeli army leveled new accusations at UNRWA on March 4th, saying it employed over 450 military operatives from Hamas and other armed groups, and that Israel had shared this intelligence with the United Nations. So with this, they're saying now they've escalated, especially as, okay, so I think what's happening is we have recently heard, I believe Sweden and Canada and maybe a couple others have reinstituted their donations to UNRWA. Because as we know, with the accusations that Israel made about UNRWA employees being involved in the October 7th attack, we had most of the Western nations, the colonial powers, pull what amounted to half of the funding for UNRWA during a point where no aid is getting in and there's a human-induced famine occurring, right? So, pretty egregious stuff. And I think because that's happening, because we're starting to see the loosening around this narrative, I think now they're trying to up the ante and say, oh, well, yeah, it wasn't just 12. We've done more research, and by research they mean torturing fucking civilians, and now we've realized that it's 450 people involved in it because, they want it shut down. They don't want any half measures with it. They want it done. And again, this is just another example of projection. Interrogation. Later that day, the head of UNRWA warned of a deliberate and concerted campaign aimed at editing the agency's work, citing comments by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and destruction of the agency's infrastructure. So this is, of course, what we've seen is them talking endlessly about wanting UNRWA shut down, saying it's an agent of Hamas, saying that the UN is biased, that anti-Semitic. I mean, we've seen just Israel undermine and thwart and scoff at the authority of the UN. And, really that's a addendum for another time or sidebar for another time. But, Israel's, blatant flouting of international law coupled with, in particular the United States repeatedly barring a ceasefire resolution despite overwhelming support, literally overwhelming support for it, really threatens to permanently discredit and then in turn dismantle the United Nations system. And look, the UN is not a perfect body by any means. We know the history of the UN. It was founded by the colonial powers to kind of shore up neocolonialism in a time of crisis for the colonial project. And it is not perfect by any means, but there's a real danger of if that body falls apart, and people even that have been trying to follow international law just finally don't. What does that mean? That means the global community, the governments of the world are no longer communicating with each other in a, wide and open-ranged political discussion. That could be incredibly dangerous, right? Israel seeks UNRWA's closure. Again, going with what was said before. The report said UNRWA had documented the release of 1,002 detainees at Kerem Shalom, aged from 6 to 82 years old, as of February 19th. Just crazy. They are, they say that these are suspected of being Hamas operatives. They're not. They're just literally scooping people off the street with no rhyme or reason whatsoever. It's to implement terror in the people in those neighborhoods and towns and regions. And it's also just to have political prisoners in general. They don't care who or why because they doesn't need to have any affiliation. They just want to have people's family members in there as political prisoners, right? But that's really all I have from that, guys. Pretty telling, again, Israel torturing confessions out of UN workers. So now we know that, they're not only just killing UN workers in mass numbers, they're torturing them as well in order to get information that they want. And as we know with torture, once you start torturing people, whatever confession or thing that they tell you is automatically thrown out the window as evidence because guess what? When you inflict pain on human beings, if you inflict enough pain on them, they will tell you whatever the fuck that you want to hear in order to stop the fucking pain, So pretty horrific stuff, guys. We're going to go into this next article here. This one's relatively brief as well. This one is from Al Jazeera, obviously been an indispensable source during this conflict. Just a little bit of coverage on some of the stuff that's been going on in the West Bank, especially with Ramadan being here, guys. Says Israeli forces launch deadly raids in occupied West Bank, casualties mounting, with at least 4 Palestinians, including 2 minors, killed and dozens wounded. And keep in mind, that is just from the last few days, right? Israeli forces have killed at least 4 people, including 2 minors, in raids on multiple locations in the occupied West Bank, Palestinian officials reported on Wednesday. Israeli forces shot dead a 13-year-old boy identified as Rami al-Haluli, in the Shufat refugee camp in occupied East Jerusalem on Tuesday evening. The Israeli border police said he had fired fireworks at them. You know, these instances are really just indicative of colonial policing here in the United States, where we see black people being killed by the U.S. police for any reason. It doesn't matter. Like, you could pretty much, if you're a police officer, especially in a major urban center, you can kill a black person in the street and just make some shit up, and that's it, because you have qualified immunity and all this shit. This is very much reminds me of this, and that's why we saw a lot of crossover, of course, between Palestinian resistance and Black Lives Matter resistance, particularly in 2020 and 2021, because the parallels, you know, I think that was a real shifting moment for the way people living in the imperial core began to visualize the American system and the colonial system and the imperial system that they live under. And I think it really started to shift the body politique of everyday working class people, where even now, you know, this would have been unthinkable 2 decades ago. You see unions really finally, after decades and decades, taking up social and political issues in a way that they hadn't for a very long time, right? And I think this Palestinian crossover with Black Lives Matter movement really kind of was the catalyst for that, and it's because of instances like this of just indiscriminate police killing, right? Israel's far-right national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir expressed support for Israeli soldiers amid outrage over the killing. "I salute the fighter who killed the terrorist," Ben-Gvir posted on X. However, the witnesses said the slain Palestinian teen had shot the fireworks upwards into the air, not at the Israeli forces. Al Jazeera's Laura Khan reported from occupied East Jerusalem. So we will play this video here. It's 4 minutes. It gives more context and gives you some footage of everything that was going on and some of the raids as well in East Jerusalem, but we'll save that towards the end here. Witness accounts have corroborated 2 videos that we've seen. One is of the boy shooting the fireworks up in the air. And keep in mind, it's Ramadan. This is like the biggest Muslim holiday, religious holiday that there is. People shoot fireworks, right? Not in the vicinity of the Israeli soldiers, and the other is of him shot lying on the ground, and his mother is seen devastated. And this goes along with this particular instance happened. It is happening in the context of there is large uprisings, both peaceful and armed, going on in the West Bank, and it's really interesting that we don't hear as much about that, even from very Palestinian-centric news sources, such as, say, the Electronic Intifada. We don't see a lot of coverage of that. I'm not sure why that is. But, you know, there's enough uprising and responses to Israeli violence and confrontations between Palestinian militants and IDF that this at any other time would maybe qualify as an intifada, but due to just the pure egregiousness and intensity of the armed struggle in the Gaza Strip, I think it's just unfortunately gone to the wayside. So this instance is happening in the context of a very tense situation in the West Bank with raids by the IDF and settler militias, and then, of course, Palestinians responding to that with their own armed defense and things like that. And then, of course, it's also happening in the context of Ramadan, where we see the IDF throughout its history, purposefully going after people to make a political, religious, ethno-state statement. You know, like it's like the equivalent of when the Nazis would go after Jewish people during certain holidays and things like that. It's that kind of energy, right? And it'll talk about that some in the article a little bit further down. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said it treated 5 others wounded by Israeli fire. Overnight, Israeli raids were also reported in the town of Anapta, east of Tulkarem, where shots were fired, and in the village of Berin, south of Nablus, where Israeli forces attacked a vehicle, wounding a 35-year-old man and his 3-month-old child. Another, I'm not sure if she's dead, but another fucking wounded or killed infant. The Israeli police claim they shot 5 men near the town of Al-Jib, northwest of Jerusalem, as they were throwing Molotov cocktails. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said 23-year-old Zaid Ward Shukri Khalifa and 16-year-old Abdullah Mamoun Hassan Asaf were killed. I'm getting better with these Arabic names. Somebody pat me on the back, please. Nominally better anyway. According to the WAPA news agency, the 3 other men shot are being treated in the Palestine medical complex in Ramallah. Israeli forces also stormed the grounds of the Jenin government hospital, shooting 1 Palestinian man dead and wounding 5 others. WAPA reported the victim, Rabbi al-Nursi, was in his 20s. Al-Wafa correspondent reported that Israeli forces stormed the hospital's yard and opened fire at a group of civilians who were standing in front of the emergency department. I mean, again, just more murder and destruction in the healthcare infrastructure of Palestine, right? I mean, they're not holding anything back. I mean, the Israeli IDF, the Israeli government, the Israeli people have gone off the fucking deep end. I mean, they're at the level now of, like, in the U.S. South at the onset of Jim Crow, where people were having fucking picnics under dead, lynched bodies hanging from a tree. And no, that's not an exaggeration, right? I'm saying they literally have parties. Israeli people have parties where they go to the border and they'll block off highways and shit where aid is trying to get in, and they'll barbecue. And you can see tweets of like, bring your kids, we're going to have a bounty house. I'm not fucking kidding. I mean, tell me this ain't Nazi level shit. Explain to me how this is not Nazi level shit. Because they're Jewish? Are you fucking high? It doesn't matter. Some of this stuff, I just get speechless. I don't know, man. I don't even know what to say to that. The killing followed multiple raids across the city of Jenin and Jenin refugee camp. Dozens of Israeli military vehicles and bulldozers supported by drones and an undercover special unit took part in the raid in the early hours of Wednesday. Violence has surged in the occupied West Bank since Hamas's October 7th attack, triggering the war in Gaza. At least 427 Palestinians have been killed there, mostly during confrontations with Israeli forces. Israeli-Palestinian tensions often soar during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which began Sunday, over access to Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied East Jerusalem. Because a lot of times you'll see Israel blocking the entrance of worshipers into perhaps the only religious site as important to Muslims as, Mecca and stuff like that, right? But yeah, guys, as you can see, tensions are continuing to escalate here in the West Bank. And, we've heard a lot of speculation about how, once Israel's done with Gaza, they plan on turning to the West Bank to push everybody there, not into Egypt like with the Gaza Strip, but into Jordan, into the Transjordan area just on the other side of the Jordan River. And I do suspect that's going to be the case, but I can also suspect... I don't know that it will take the same form, though, as what's happening in the Gaza Strip. I think it's going to be more of this. But the thing is to keep in mind that the more this happens, the more Palestinians are going to resist, and we're already beginning to see that process. And I wonder what the moment is going to be where it's going to really explode, because you can feel it. When you talk to people from there, hear interviews from there, you can feel it like it's about to fucking explode. And I don't know what that would be, but I just want to also point out the complete insanity of the IDF. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have this war in Gaza, you have this northern front on the Lebanese border, and now you're trying to stir the pot in the fucking West Bank. Like, what are you doing? Like, the madness of opening up this many conflicts when they quite clearly, as we know from reports coming out of Hamas and their videos of them killing IDF soldiers with no problem. You're not winning in Gaza. Like, sure, you're killing all these civilians, but you could use the troops from the north and from the West Bank. And in the case of the north with the Lebanese border, you know, you got Hezbollah up there kind of, stinging here and there. But really, all Hezbollah is doing is responding to when the Israelis do an escalation. But it just shows you how disconnected from reality and how insane some of these people in the Netanyahu regime are. Because they have lost they believe in nothing more than Lebensraum for Israel, right? Greater Israel. And they think they're ordained by God, and they think nothing can stop them, and they're going to just, if they had their way, they'd make war on the entire Arab world, right? It's just absolutely insane. There's zero level of competence anywhere in that administration, or for that matter, in the IDF. But yeah, guys, that's really all I have for you. I was going to play that video for you if you want. I'll go ahead and roll that quick, actually, because it just has more context. You can kind of see the tension on the ground there and what it's like, because, like I said, we haven't seen as much coverage from what's been going on in the West Bank, right? So we'll go ahead and roll this for you guys.
Where the Israeli military is again conducting a series of raids. Israeli bulldozers have stormed the city of Jenin and are destroying infrastructure. At least one Palestinian was killed during the incursion outside of Ramallah. Israeli forces shot dead at least 2 Palestinians during a raid in Al-Jib. 3 others have been injured and are seeking treatment in hospital. In occupied East Jerusalem, the Israeli military has killed a 13-year-old Palestinian boy. Rami El-Halhuli was shot in the chest while he was playing with fireworks near the Shuafat refugee camp checkpoint. Let's get the latest with Al Jazeera's Laura Khan, who's in occupied East Jerusalem for us. Laura, let's start with the ongoing army raids in Jenin and Tulkarem. Tell us about the latest you're hearing about the situation there.
Well, Polly, it's a developing situation across the occupied West Bank. We've seen raids from the north to the south, from Hebron in the south up to Ramallah. Most recently, Nablus. We've seen the Israeli forces storming Nablus in the last hour or so in Tulkarem. But most noteworthy is Jenin. We saw around 30 Israeli military vehicles entering Jenin refugee camp. They were accompanied by some armoured bulldozers that started to destroy infrastructure, tear up the streets. We've even seen video of them taking down big water vats on the sides of houses, so really causing quite extensive damage. They have been met with some confrontations from Palestinian fighters, and we've also seen some improvised explosives going off around the Jenin refugee camp. We do know one man has been shot dead. He was standing outside a hospital. His name is Rabia al-Nawrasi. And we know at least one more person has been critically injured. It is an ongoing situation there, so we will keep you updated.
Right. And we have a 13-year-old boy, Laura, killed by an Israeli sniper in occupied East Jerusalem. What do we know happened and what have been the reactions?
This is Rami al-Halhuli, as you said, 13 years old, shot by a sniper in the chest. Now, there are 2 different stories contradicting each other. The Israeli military said that they were endangered by the boy shooting fireworks towards them, and they then decided to take action, shot him dead. From eyewitness accounts and also corroborated by video that we've seen, shows the boy shooting fireworks up into the air, as so many people have done during Ramadan, during the holy month. And the second video we've seen is of the boy lying on the floor and his mother obviously responding, devastated. At this point, he was taken away by a Palestinian ambulance. So it's important to note he was on the occupied West Bank side of the Israeli wall, but it's part of occupied East Jerusalem. So the ambulance took him to the wall. He then had to be transferred into an Israeli ambulance where he was taken to a medical complex here, and he was pronounced dead. So 2 very different stories. 2 more men shot dead tonight as well in occupied East Jerusalem. The Israeli military once again had a different version of events. So they said that 5 men were shooting Molotov cocktails towards them. In a video they sent out, it shows them then trying to escape to a car when they shot 2 of them dead, a 16-year-old and a 23-year-old, and 3 more are recovering in hospital. The families have already held their funerals in Al.
But yeah, guys, as you can see, sorry, let me get the mic closer to me here. Pretty clear that kid was not firing fireworks at the IDF. Also, they're fireworks. So, and then as you can see through that footage, bulldozers, armed groups, raids, you can, the way the Palestinians there were carrying the bodies of the like you can feel something about to happen. And we already have instances, like they said, of IEDs, Molotov cocktails. Things are going to reach a head there. And if it does pop off in a huge way, I don't know that it'll be in the same capacity as, say, like with Hamas, but it could, particularly in Jerusalem, particularly this time of year, the holy month of Ramadan and the lunar cycle of the Islamic calendar, right? We had to keep an eye on that. So, we'll try to do more coverage of what's going on in the West Bank since we haven't seen as much of it here on the Entitled Millennials channel. But yeah, guys, that's really all I have for you. I do have a couple of announcements. I have a new computer coming in. Praise the gods. Praise the gods. As you know, this computer's been giving me a lot of trouble. It's 10 years old. It's time. And so with that, I will finally have the technological capacity, the technological means to experiment with live streaming. I do want to try to do that. Drop a comment if that is what you would like to see me do. And, maybe drop some comments with what you'd like to see out of a live stream. I've had people tell me they want me to play video games, talk politics while I do a live stream. I don't know if I'll do that, but it sounds fun. But, I kind of intend on doing more of, kind of what I'm doing now, like this kind of stuff. But I might do more rapid fire, here's what's going on in the world type of thing. Just comment with what you want rather than more of a deep dive. I'll still keep doing these videos that are not live. But my hope is that live streaming will help get around some of this algorithm, because you guys know how badly I've been fucked by that. Like, it's just terrible. And it seems like live streaming once a week coupled with regular posting of videos can really help that. Also, I don't know, among you subscribers, I could use help with this channel. I want to produce as much content as possible, and I could use help from a subscriber, a fan of the show, or somebody who knows me personally to maybe edit videos for clips, to post things on social media that I never get around to, like Instagram or Twitter, or I don't know. But if you'd like to maybe get involved in helping with the channel, please let me know. And again, I'm still thinking about rebranding the channel. Just to give it more of a, when we started this channel, it was Entitled Millennials because it was me and my co-host, and we did more of a humorous, fun kind of banter. But as you know, we've clearly shifted away from that, and it's a lot more serious analysis. At least I try to make it more serious. I'm trying, So I don't know. I'm still leaning towards that name, Media Underground, because, to me, independent media, we have pretty radical quote unquote underground politics here. And again, my idea for the channel is still the same, in that it would be someday a broader network where multiple people, not just me, have analytical political shows and podcasts and things like that on the channel. And I think, Media Underground just kind of has a bigger umbrella for that and has a little more seriousness to it, while still kind of keeping that punk rock vibe that we try to go for here, a little bit uncouth, great analysis, but a little more casual too. So I don't know, guys, just a couple of updates for you. And again, thank you to everybody who's been supporting the show by watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, all of that. Special thank you to our patrons, to all of y'all who are being really involved in, keeping the show going financially. Really appreciate that. If you want to support my independent media work, you can at Patreon, at patreon.com/entitledmillennials. You can do that for just $1 a month. I hope you will. I'm sorry I don't post on there as much as I should, but it's just me running the show here. Just me running this ship, and boy, I get tired. So you can also support my independent media work with one-time donations through PayPal at paypal.me/entitledmillennials. If y'all want to drop some donations there to help cover some of the costs of this computer, would be greatly appreciated. But anyway, guys, that's all I have for you. As always, I love talking the issues with you. I love hanging out with you. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon. Bye-bye for now.